So today we are beginning our new series looking at the way of Jesus. And throughout Lent, we're going to be thinking about how we might build in patterns and practices into rule of life, which will help us to encounter the love of God, to learn to live more like Jesus and go in the power of the Spirit, to see lives and communities transformed. Now, when we say rule of life, you might wonder what we're talking about. We're not talking about rules to follow. It's more like a structure to hang things on, like a trellis would be for plants, where you tie the plant up for it. You hold the plant up so that it can grow, like a frame. And we want to explore the way of Jesus for 40 days, just as he spent 40 days in the wilderness, preparing himself for what to come. So we'll be looking at how we can practice and get into rhythms of being with him, becoming more like him, and doing what he did. Rather than thinking, as I often do, and I'm not sure whether you do as well, I often think, I'll start doing that. I must read my Bible more or spend time with more time with God praying, but I'll do that next week. Or perhaps I'll do it when I've got more time or when it's the school holidays and there's a bit more space. Rather than that, we'll be exploring spiritual practices that can become part of our daily, weekly and monthly rhythms, both individually and together as a church. And we'll try our best as well to get practical about how we can journey together as a church, discovering more about the way of Jesus. So today we are beginning with time for God. How can we make sure that we've got time for God in our patterns and rhythms of life? What difference might that make, and what practices could we actually put into place? I wonder how you start your week. Is it feeling rested, ready to go, excited for the week ahead? Do you start your week beginning from rest? Now, with the Leadership Development Year students this year, we've been looking at some spiritual practices. And this term, we've been using the material from Practicing the Way, which is written by John Mark Comer. And we've been looking at the Sabbath, taking a day off each week to rest and to delight in God. And after each session, we set ourselves something that we're going to go away and do and practice. And it started off pretty easy. Pick a time, maybe just choose how long might be, just a few hours to start with, and then pick a few things that you're going to do in that time. Sounded pretty easy. So I went home and I chatted to Mick, and we decided that we'd give it a go. We decided we were going to set aside a whole day a week where we didn't do any jobs and we spent time resting and time with God. So Saturday rolled around. Our weeks had been really busy. There were jobs everywhere to do in our house. We just recently moved house, so there was lots to do. So we were like, right, we're going to have this day off. And the thing is, it turns out that I don't know how to rest. So while Mick's watching the rugby, I decide I don't want to watch rugby. So I think, great, I'll read. I like reading. But I very quickly get bored of that because I can't really sit still. I can't rest when I can see all the things around me that need to be done. So I decide, let's go to the garden centre when the rugby's finished, because that's rest for me. I like going to the garden centre. I like plants. I like gardening. It brings me joy. I like getting new flowers and plants. I can bring our backyard to life. It feels like it's cultivating God's creation, experiencing it, enjoying it, delighting it. It sounds like Sabbath to me. Enjoying something that God has created me to enjoy. But the thing is, I decided we'd go to one garden centre on one side of the town. They didn't have what I wanted, so I was like, let's just drive all the way around the bypass to the other garden centre on the other side of town. And then while we're here, we're just actually quite near B&Q, and I need to get something for work for Monday. So we'll just quickly go there, so I don't need to go tomorrow afternoon. And before we know it, we've been to like 3 or 4 other shops. We're really tired, we're quite grumpy, and we've got to the end of the Sabbath and we have not rested. I take full blame for this. It wasn't Mick, it was completely me, because I just don't know how to rest. So I started another week tired, probably grumpy, and not that much used to those around me. I wonder what you are like when you are tired. Maybe that's a question that your family and friends could answer better than you can. When you're exhausted, when you're running on empty, what's your mood like? How do you react to those around you? How much of life do you enjoy? What do you have time for? What is it that slips? Is it routines, intentions, good practices? How do you treat your siblings or your parents or your partner or your friends? How much do you think about things beyond yourself? In the Genesis passage that we saw on the screen, we heard about the pattern for work and rest that God set right at the beginning when he created the earth. It says this in Genesis 2, "Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work he had done in creation." From the very beginning, God set apart a day of rest. He set a pattern of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. And he built that rhythm into the DNA of creation. The practice of Sabbath, taking a day off, has been there since the beginning. And there's been study after study that says apparently there is literally no difference in productivity between a 70-hour plus work and a 55-hour work. And it's like the way that we're wired means our optimal is 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. It's how our souls have been designed by God, a rhythm of rest from the beginning. When we begin to rest, we've got resources to draw from the week. So this is our rest, and we've got resources that we can draw from. Just our normal week, perhaps our week at home, our week at work, our week at school, takes a bit out of us. We begin to use those resources. But when we've rested, we've got some resources in here. And when we want to help out people who are struggling, we've got something to give. When something happens that we're not expecting, we've got something to give. We've got the energy to cope with it. When someone is mean to us, perhaps, we've got the patience to be kind back. And Jesus recognized all of this. He knew the importance of rest, and he encouraged his disciples to rest. There's a bit in the Bible in Mark 6 where Jesus is speaking to the apostles, and it says this: "The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done, and told him all they'd done and taught. And he said to them, 'Come away to a deserted place all by yourself and take a rest for a while.' For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a deserted place." Jesus and his disciples were really busy. There was loads going on. They'd been working really hard. They'd not even had a chance to get food. But he calls them to come away and get some rest. He doesn't want them to push through until they're completely exhausted and they've got nothing left. Again, Jesus speaks on rest in Matthew 11, as we already heard earlier this morning. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus calls us to come to him. He'll show us real rest. He gets it. And if we walk with him, he'll show us that rest. And he's talking here more than just about a day off, more than a little bit of rest to recover from work. But he's talking about living in the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is not about how much we can get done and who's the most tired at the end of the day. It's about living fully as the people God created us to be. Having a day off is an opportunity to remind us of this, to remind ourselves that God is king over everything, to stop and to lift our eyes from all that's right in front of us, from everything that feels like it has to be done, the jobs, the pressure from others, and instead letting go of trying to control everything. It's resetting ourselves, lifting our eyes up to the King, giving him everything and trusting him with everything, so that we begin in rest, doing things in his strength and not ours. It's a space to worship him, to stop, to bring some perspective and to delight in him, to enjoy ourselves and enjoy time with God and time with others, to enjoy the creation that we've got the privilege to live in, to do the things that we enjoy, to play, to feast, to dance, to sing, to laugh, to pray, to tell stories, and do whatever feels fun to you, to do something that brings you deep joy, to rest and worship. And for me, there was nothing wrong with going to the garden centre. I definitely experienced more of who God is through gardening in a way that I actually probably struggle to understand, but it feels and explain, but it feels like I'm experiencing something of who God is when I do it. So I wonder what those things are for you, the things that make you feel more fully human, who God made you to be when you actually stop to think about it. For you, it could be anything, something that refills you, where you experience God's love, something that fills you up. When we start our week in this way, when we begin with rest from a place of rest, a place of delighting in God, it changes the rest of our week. Now, I told you about that epic fail of my Sabbath, but I've kept trying. And it's not easy to put in a new pattern or rhythm. It requires work. But just a few more weeks in, I can see the difference that it's already making. I can see the impact of the rest. As hard as it was to stop, it feels counterproductive to start with, but it's good. And now I really look forward to it. It's a day when I can forget about the constant stream of things I've got to do at work and at home, and I can stop and enjoy. And I don't just sit at home. I'd be bored. Last week, we went to the beach, for example. This week, I spent time with my family. But what I've noticed is that my Sundays, which are the first day of my working week, and my Mondays feel a lot easier. I'm less tired. And by Wednesday, when I'm tired, I know that I've got a Sabbath coming and I can get there. And as I set that time aside, I'm more aware of God's presence in the week. And when maybe something big happens, I don't crumble. I surprise myself by being more aware of God's peace in me. I stay steadier and stronger. Sabbath is setting aside a whole day to follow God's example. The Hebrew word for Sabbath is Shabbat, which means to stop and to delight. To stop the work and delight in God himself. Time for God. Time to pray and reflect and read, but time to enjoy God through play. For you, that might be doing something outside or a big meal with family or friends, reading a good book, going out for cake and hot chocolate, fill in the blank. We're all different. But don't get caught up in what you can and can't do. The questions that might be helpful to filter it through are, does it feel like rest? Does it feel like worship? Do you experience God's love? Can you experience God's delight in it? And you might you might end up getting it wrong a few times, just like I did, but then you'll know, and that's okay. For me, buying things doesn't feel like rest, unless it's like going to the local bakery and getting a sourdough. That feels a little bit like something I wouldn't do the rest of the time. So for you need to give it a go and try. Maybe for you, it's something that doing what you are good at. Maybe it's like playing football or freewheeling down a hill, and it's something that you can do that God delights in as you do it. Whatever it is that you enjoy, with your heart focused on God, knowing he's in control and it's his kingdom and not ours. As I said at the beginning, we want to build a rule of life, or continue building it if you already do that, and encouraging one another in it. So we've got some ideas of things that you can give a try to begin from rest this week. What for you would feel like rest and worship, and what can you do where your heart is focused on God? And some suggestions are just going to come up onto the screen and things that you can try. So you might want to try having a conversation with your friends or family and trying to work out for yourself what feels like rest and worship for you. You might want to come up with some ideas and then try one out. You might want to try a Sabbath, where you stop doing jobs maybe for just half a day to start with and see how that feels, where you get to rest and delight in God. If you need a nap as part of that, I recommend that. That's good too. You might want to go in for a whole Sabbath. If you want to do that, it might be worth thinking and preparing beforehand about what needs to get done so that you're ready. What jobs do you need to do the day before or the evening before to make sure that you're ready and you can have a day where you can rest and you don't need to do any jobs. You might want to set a practice on your Sabbath. For example, having a family meal where you share what you're thankful to God for this week. Or perhaps you want to do something by yourself, or you journal by yourself, or spend time in solitude, resting in God's presence. There's loads of different things you could do. You might want to give the app Lectio 365 a go. There's an app for adults, but there's also an app for families as well. And you could do that once a week on a Sabbath. They have a Sabbath-themed day on a Sunday. And you could, there's a prayer themed around the Sabbath, and you could say that together or with others or by yourself. So there's lots of different things there for you to have a go at and think about how you could do Sabbath. If we began with rest, what would the rest of our weeks look like? If we spent time with God, resting in him, allowing him to restore us, spent time being fully the people God created us to be, letting him have control rather than holding on for ourselves, how would we experience more of God, understanding more of his heart for us and those around us, seeing more of his kingdom in this broken world, and have time and resources to go and make a difference to those around us, being more fully human and coming back to beginning the week with rest and with our view of who we are and who God is restored and in its proper place. So what's one thing that you could give a go this week? We're going to spend a few minutes now just having a think about that. What's one thing that you could try this week to begin your week with rest? Perhaps you want to think about that by yourself for a couple of minutes, or perhaps you want to talk to the people around you, talk in your families, talk to the person that you've come with, talk to a friend, or do that by yourself. But what is it that you're going to have a go at this week to begin your week with rest?